I am Artemis. I was named after the mighty huntress, the guardian of forests and wild nature, the powerful and virgin goddess of the pantheon. It was a cruel twist of fate, for my hands were not made to draw a bow and loose arrows like hers, but to heal instead of shed blood, to save lives instead of take them. I was far removed from the brutal, merciless nature of hunting. My battle was not to take the life of an animal, but to bring back to life a creature caught in the grip of disease and pain. My childhood was spent in the shadow of the ancient cypress trees that surrounded our village, reaching up to the sky, listening to every whisper, every breath of the earth, with great curiosity and deep respect. While other children gathered under the midday sun, playing warrior games with wooden swords, chasing balls, I would retreat to the secluded, damp corners of the forest, bending down, learning the language of every blade of grass, every flower, every root. My mother, the oldest and wisest healer in our village, passed this ancient knowledge to me like a treasure. At first light, before dewdrops fell from the leaves, she would take me with her and teach me the spirit, purpose, and power of each plant. Her wisdom was like a warm river, seeping from my fingertips into my soul. My mother always warned me, "Don't go out during the full moon, my daughter. On that night, the veil of the world thins, spirits wander, ancient powers awaken, and dangers emerge." But despite her warnings, I felt an irresistible pull on full moon nights. It was as if the heart of nature beat more vibrantly on those nights. The pulse of the earth struck with a stronger rhythm. The darkness of the night opened secret doors to me, and the light of the stars illuminated my soul. Under the moon's silvery, mystical glow, the forest seemed even more magical, more mysterious. Trees whispered, shadows danced, as if invisible beings breathed with me. With every breath, I felt the fresh scent of humidity in the air, leaves and soil, penetrate my soul. This was not just a scent, but also a connection, a deep spiritual bond I formed with nature itself. Our village was a small and humble place, nestled at the foot of the mountains, as if in a forgotten corner of the world. It was a simple community, living in its own cycle, far from the noise and haste of time in the modern world. People lived by the rhythm of the earth, waking with the sunrise and resting with the sunset. Everyone had a place, a duty, a purpose. Women baked bread in stone ovens at first light, and the warm, fresh scent spread through every street of the village. Men plowed fields, sowed crops, and harvested. Their faces were sunburnt, their hands calloused. Children herded goats on the green slopes around the village, playing in muddy streams with joyful shouts. Everyone was a part of this small, self-sufficient world. I, however, was different. In the mornings, long before the first rays of the sun painted the mountain peaks golden, I would go into the forest. I walked on tiptoes, as if afraid to harm the earth, moving silently. Without my mother or father knowing, I would reach the furthest, most secluded places. There, I would gather rare roots, find medicinal herbs, and heal injured animals. A bird with a broken wing, a rabbit with a bandaged leg, even a fox caught in an ambush. When I looked into their desperate eyes, I felt an indescribable pain inside me, and that pain moved me to act. In my dreams, ancient spirits, fairies, or perhaps the goddess herself would whisper to me which herb was good for what. Sometimes the dewdrops on a flower's petals, sometimes the patterns on a tree's bark, Sometimes the reflections in a puddle would guide me. This was more an instinct, an intuition than mere knowledge. When I was 9, Anna, the youngest baby in the village, was burning with a high fever. Her eyes rolled, her body trembled. My mother, despite being the most experienced healer, said there was nothing more she could do. But in my dream, I had seen a purple-flowered herb growing at the base of a rock on the highest peak of the mountains. I immediately ran to the forest, found that herb, crushed it and mixed it with water and gave it to Anna. The next morning, Anna's fever had dropped, and her small body was peacefully asleep. The village was filled with astonishment and joy. They thanked me, seeing me as a blessed child. When I was 12, I helped a woman in labor. She had been in labor for 2 days and was about to take her last breath. Her husband's eyes were filled with despair. Using one of my mother's special mixtures, I placed my palms on her belly. I transferred the energy within me, the power of nature, to her, drawing out all her pain. A few hours later, a healthy baby was born with a cry. The villagers saw these events as miracles. They thought I was blessed, that I carried a gift. But this would not last forever. People always fear what they don't know, especially powers they can't control. First, whispers began, spreading like poisonous seeds carried by the wind. This girl is not a normal child. There's something different about her. The pure, innocent days of my childhood slowly began to darken. At school, my friends started to keep their distance from me. They didn't include me in their games. When they played in the village square, they would fall silent when I approached. The innocent sparkle in their eyes had been replaced by a strange reserve and fear. Then the suspicions grew. The shadows lengthened. How does she heal without prayers? Where does this power come from without appealing to the gods, without offering blood? My healing contradicted their understanding of God, their own beliefs. In their eyes, I was acting with a power independent of the gods, perhaps even demonic. The village elders tried to take me to temples and make me pray. They wanted to purify me. But I didn't feel impure. On the contrary, my connection with nature gave me a sense of purity. Their fears pierced my heart like daggers. That night, the sky changed. The stars were aligned in an unusual pattern I had never seen before. It was as if they were drawing an ancient map, pointing to the new direction of my destiny. And outside the village, I heard a hum coming from the 3-way crossroads, like the wind passing through the trees, but deeper, more alive. This sound was like the heartbeat of the world, an invitation calling me. From that moment on, I was no longer just a healer. That moment was a turning point. The healing power in my hands, the love in my heart, would now be part of a much larger, much older mission, not just to help people. I had become part of a prophecy. This prophecy would drag me into the unknown.
The silence of the village, once a symbol of peace and security, had become suffocating, menacing. Everywhere I felt eyes fixed on me. Once, the wind whispered old tales and stories of lost sages to me. Now it carried the fears, the hushed voices, the whispers of the people. Those who passed my house, old acquaintances, childhood friends, began to avoid my gaze. Their eyes remained fixed on the ground or the opposite wall, as if fleeing a dangerous plague. Young mothers, seeing me, would grip their children's hands tighter, hiding them behind their skirts. The woman whose labor pains I had eased years ago now distanced herself from me, a shadow of regret in her eyes. Their whispers were like dagger blows to me. She's not normal. How without prayers? She's a witch. These words had turned my healing into a curse. My greatest pain was that the pure bond I felt when touching and healing people was now surrounded by a wall. One morning, as the sunlight streamed through my window and hit the floor of my room, I looked at what lay before my door. My heart pounded. On the doorstep lay a rooster, its neck bent, its blood still fresh. Its feathers gleamed brightly, but the light of life had long since left its eyes. This was not merely the death of an animal. This was a silent but powerful warning. A message. You no longer have a place in this village. I slowly opened the door. The cold air hit my face. I bent down and touched the rooster's lifeless body. Its still warm blood stained my fingertips. My hands, once bringing healing and life, were now tainted with the blood of death. The pain that pierced my heart was sharper than any physical ache. This was the desperate last cry of a people who feared me, who didn't understand me. They wanted me to retreat, not to disturb their peace. But I hadn't harmed anyone. I had only listened, only healed. That night, as the entire village was shrouded in darkness, I opened my mother's chest. The chest, with its old oak scent, carried me back to my childhood, to the days when she told me stories and revealed the secrets of medicinal herbs. Deep within the chest, among dried flowers and old threads, I found a worn parchment that whispered of an ancient past with its very texture. The ink on the parchment had faded with time, but was still strong. On it, a woman was depicted with 3 different faces. Hecate. One face was young and virginal, symbolizing innocence and new beginnings. The second face was mature and maternal, representing wisdom and creativity. The last face was old and weary, evoking death and transformation. Hecate's 3 faces led me to the secret of my own mother, not a goddess. She had taught me healing, but she must have known that this power held a much greater secret, a secret that would one day find me. On the edge of the parchment, a single sentence written in small, shaky handwriting sent a shiver down my spine. At the crossroads, the night shows you her 3 faces. Whichever you turn to, your destiny will flow in that direction. My mother had offered me a choice. She had told me that the healing power in my soul was far beyond a mere talent. Her wisdom had protected me, preparing me for this moment. That night, I lay down in my bed and closed my eyes. In my mind, the parchments came alive. I found myself at a desolate, moonlit crossroads. 3 paths stretched before me, each like the door to a different destiny. The first path led into bottomless darkness. There was no sound, no light, no sign of life. Only absolute nothingness. This path represented the dark side of my power, the possibility of becoming a witch, a fear and hatred turning me into a monster, or conversely, choosing to abandon all my power and live like an ordinary person, losing my identity in the shadow of fear. The second path was engulfed in flames. A crimson glow illuminated even the sky. On the side of the road were burning, ruined houses, the dreams of people set ablaze.
This was the path of anger and revenge. It represented giving back what the village had done to me, living with hatred for them, turning my inner pain into a weapon. This was a path that would burn me, turn my soul to ash. The third path disappeared into the mists. There was no flames, no darkness, only the unknown. The path did not show where it led, but in the mist, there was a whisper, a hope, a call. This path represented finding balance in myself, being neither witch nor victim, writing my own destiny. This was perhaps the most dangerous because I didn't know what I would encounter. Hecate stood before me in my dream. All three of her faces looked at me, but her lips was sealed. She did not speak, she simply knew. Her eyes told me that I had to make a choice, that only my soul could determine which path I would choose. When I woke in the morning, the impact of my dream was still upon me. Hecate's call echoed in my ears. I was startled by sounds from outside. A crowd had gathered in front of my door. My mother's house, the home of the most respected healer in the village, was now the target of a lynching attempt. Stones in their hands, prayers on their lips, and in their eyes, that disgusting fear and ignorance. "Witch," they screamed. "Curse of the gods, she's polluting our village." This was a bitter history, repeated for thousands of years. If a woman challenges society with her knowledge, with her power, they want to destroy her, to burn her, seeing her as a force they cannot control. But I did not flee. The parchment in my mother's chest, Hecate's three faces, those three paths in my dream, all had given me courage. I took a deep breath, my chest rising. On my shoulders, there was no longer just the burden of a healer. There was the weight of a prophecy, a destiny. My eyes no longer looked like an innocent girl's, but wisely, as Hecate had shown me. I opened the door. The crowd had not expected me to be so brave, so calm. Their screams died down. Their shouts ceased. A man holding a stone dropped it to the ground. They recoiled. At that moment, I understood. The true curse was ignorance. Their fears stemmed not from my power, but from their own unknown, their own inadequacies. Even if they knew what they believed in, they couldn't accept that what they believed could be more powerful than a woman. Even if I healed them, I could not heal their souls. And my path no longer led through this village. Their silence was inviting me to a new journey, a new life. I closed the door behind me. I turned my back on the village. I began to walk away from the place that had once been my home, but now excluded me. My steps were firm. There was curiosity in my heart, not fear. And I stepped on Hecate's path, into the unknown, into that third path lost in the mist. This was only the beginning.
When I turned my back on the village that was once my home, but now cast me out, there was no wave, no voice saying, "Don't go." No one even looked back at me. It was as if I had never lived there. My presence suddenly erased, vanished like a phantom. When a witch is seen off, silence is kept. There are no farewells, no curses. Their silence was the loudest curse echoing in my ears. Not a single tear fell from my eye, for the pain in my heart was too deep to allow tears to flow. The village houses, with their tiny windows, seemed like teardrops to me. Each held the fear, ignorance, and hatred the people within harbored for me.
That village, once my sanctuary, was now like a black hole swallowing me whole. Leaving was not just an escape, but a necessity for my soul's survival. The moon, hanging in the sky, was a magnificent full moon, as if it had been specially waiting to illuminate the entire night. Its silvery light was both a guide and a warning to me. Once, with the healing knowledge my mother taught me, I would use the power of the full moon. Now this power was both a blessing and a curse. The only item on my back was an old leather bag from my mother's chest, containing only the worn parchment and a few medicinal herbs to last me throughout my journey. They were the last fragments of my past. I needed nothing else. When I set out, my body felt lighter, but my soul was heavier. The earth whispered beneath my footsteps, "Daughter of the night, where are you going? What destiny do you seek?" This voice was the familiar, calm sound I had heard since childhood, guiding me. But now it held curiosity, a question mark. As I walked, every touch of the earth merged with a part of my soul. I didn't know which way to go. All I knew was that I had to move forward. I had no answer, only a feeling, an instinct. Hecate's call was pulling me towards the unknown. With every step, every breath, I moved further away from the oppressive, suffocating atmosphere of the village and closer to the freedom of nature. When I reached the forest, the trees seemed to recognize me. Their branches reached out to touch me, their leaves rustling together in whispers. It was as if they had found a lost friend, someone they had been waiting for a long time. Even in the bright moonlight, the shadows reflected the darkness within me, the indescribable pain of leaving the village. I walked deeper and deeper into the wilderness. Was I afraid? Of course, but fear could no longer stop me, because I knew what fear was. It was what I had seen in people's eyes, what I had felt in their hearts for years. It was a reaction to the unknown, a defense mechanism. And if you know the name of something, you can control it. I knew the name of fear, and instead of surrendering to it, I chose to leave it behind, to confront it. The fear within me was no longer an obstacle, but fuel, a force pushing me towards the unknown. Exhausted from the first days of my journey, I fell asleep under a massive, centuries-old oak tree. In my dream, Hecate appeared again, but this time her face was not turned towards me. Her back was to me. All three of her faces plunged into bottomless darkness. She did not speak. She simply extended her hand. In her palm was a fiery key, radiating a flickering, warm light. The flame of the key glowed as if it were a part of my own soul. Hecate's voice, this time, was clear, even in the dream realm. She said, "This is yours, but you will find its door." When I awoke, my palm was burning. There was no mark on the pillow, but between my fingers, etched beneath my skin, was a seal, the three-path symbol. It was as if Hecate's guidance was now a part of me, not just in my mind, but in my body too. This seal would be the key to an unknown door on my path. My journey was not just a physical escape. It was also an internal, spiritual journey. Every night when I looked at the sky, at the stars, they no longer appeared as they used to. It was as if there was another layer behind them, a veil. I was undergoing a cognitive transformation. Perhaps true knowledge was seen not with the eyes, but with the heart and soul. My eyes seemed to see not just the world, but the fabric of the universe, the flow of time itself. Each passing day, my connection with nature deepened. I no longer just listened to its whispers. I spoke with it. The chirping of birds told me stories. The flow of streams showed me ancient prophecies. Nature itself had become a book, a teacher for me. One evening, deep in the forest, I saw smoke rising in the distance. I felt a strange warmth in my heart. I had been alone for days, and that smoke was a sign of life. I walked. When I reached the source of the smoke, I found a small, old, moss-covered stone cabin. Its door was ajar. I gently knocked on the door. With an inviting voice from within, I entered. Inside the cabin, an old woman sat by the fire. Her face bore the marks of 1,000 years of stories. She didn't ask my name. She didn't ask who I was. She just looked into my eyes. And at that moment, I understood. Her eyes had seen the same night as mine. Silently, I sat opposite her. We didn't speak, because some women understand without needing words. She knew of my banishment from the village, the fear within me, and the hope in my heart. I too understood her loneliness, the wisdom she had carried for years, and her weariness. I stayed in her cabin for a few nights. We talked about medicinal herbs. I learned the language of the stars. We sat in silence, simply existing. When it was time to leave, as I stepped out of the cabin door, she looked at me with a slight smile and simply said, "Everyone who leaves the village either becomes a victim or a seer." Her voice was like the whisper of the wind, but every word struck my heart like a hammer blow. The victim was the cursed one, the one who fled, always feared, and ultimately perished. The seer, on the other hand, was the one who saw the prophecy, shaped the future, and held power in their own hands. Which one was I? I didn't know yet, but I was ready to learn, to write my own destiny, to find Hecate's key. The true purpose of my journey had become clear at that moment. I refused to be a victim. I accepted becoming a seer. I would not die silently as the village expected me to. I would forge my own path with my own strength. This path would lead me into the unknown, but I no longer feared the unknown. This was the journey of Artemis, daughter of the healer and the prophecy.
After leaving the cabin, the world began to appear to me as something entirely different. It was as if everything I had experienced before, every sound I had heard, every scent I had tasted, was an illusion, and reality awaited me on the threshold of the old woman's cabin. Her last words, either victim or seer, echoed in my ears like a melody, like a nightmare. And these words resonated within me with every step. I was no longer feeling everything just with my eyes, but also with that strange burning seal etched beneath my skin. The mark where the 3 paths converge was not just a symbol. It was also a map of my soul, a guide. With every step, the seal glowed in sync with my heartbeat, increasing the warmth of the blood flowing through my veins, pushing me forward with an unstoppable instinct about where I needed to go. As I walked deeper into the forest, the trees no longer looked merely like trees. The cracks in their trunks seemed like messages written in ancient letters, thousands of years old, waiting to be read. Each tree seemed to be the guardian of millennia of knowledge, of memory, and I carried the key to that knowledge. The earth trembled beneath my footsteps, as if it had been waiting for thousands of years for me to experience this moment, for my evolution. This feeling was both terrifying and incredibly familiar. It was as if I wasn't the first person to walk this path. Others had passed through these lands before me, experiencing the same feelings. My journey was no longer just an escape, but a quest. I wasn't moving away from the village's curse. Rather, I was trying to understand its essence, to transform it. This was the journey of a sage, more than just a healer. The wind no longer whispered tales to me, but prophecies. Every rustle of leaves came with a different rhythm, a different story than the last. When I looked at the night sky, the stars were no longer just points. They were parts of a large web, connected by threads. I was beginning to see the fabric of the universe, that grand ancient plan. It was as if my eyes could see a dimension beyond time and space. And this was drawing me towards that place I had seen in my dreams, where my destiny awaited me. Finally, after days of travel, sleepless and hungry, I arrived at that place. I stood at the base of the rock shown to me in my dreams, indicated by the seal on my mother's parchment.
It was surrounded by smooth, jet-black stones, as if they had once been shaped by fire. On it was a relief of a three-headed dog, Hecate's guardian. Each head looked in a different direction, as if guarding three different gates of this passage. The first head looked with innocence and the past, the second head with wisdom and the present, the third head with death, rebirth, and the future. There was a fire in their eyes, and I knew that fire was the same as the fire within me, that this three-headed dog was actually Hecate's reflection in my soul. This might not have been a physical gate, but I knew it was a passage, a threshold. Crossing this boundary would not take me back to the world I belonged to, but would transform me. This was a point of no return. This line would completely sever me from my old self, pushing me into a new and unknown future. The moon shone with all its power at the highest point in the sky. The full moon was Hecate's symbol, and its light illuminated the path before me. The seal in my palm suddenly grew warm. First a tingling, then a warmth, and finally an unbearable burning sensation. It was as if my soul was being tested by fire. The pain was physical, but also spiritual. When I touched my fingers to the cold, black surface of the rock, I felt a tremor. This wasn't just the rock trembling. The entire earth seemed to shake with an ancient hum coming from deep within, as if the world itself was welcoming me at this threshold. Even the leaves on the trees trembled. Even the sky had fallen silent under the weight of this moment. And then I heard that sound. It was neither a whisper nor a cry. This was a resonant, cosmic voice distilled from thousands of years of wisdom falling directly into my mind. If you turn back, you will learn nothing. Your knowledge will remain merely a healer's knowledge. You cannot control the curse, nor can you see the prophecy. You will live as a victim and die as a victim. If you cross, nothing will be the same. The old Artemis dies. A new being is born, neither human nor God, a solitary being. These words penetrated the deepest parts of my soul, the most secret chambers of my heart. For a moment, I hesitated. To return to the village, to continue that cursed, fearful life. Perhaps there was a chance to convince myself, but I knew that was a lie. If I returned, I would be forced to live with that fear and hatred. I would die as a victim. And at that moment, my mother's voice echoed in my mind like lightning. There was no pain or regret in her voice, only deep love and wisdom. My daughter, some paths are not chosen. They call to your soul. You listen to that path and you go. Remember, you were called not as a healer, but as a seer. This destroyed the last shred of doubt within me. My mother's voice left me not just guidance, but a legacy. She was not just a mother to me, but also a bearer of a sage, a healer's legacy. And I was ready to inherit that legacy. I knelt. I didn't turn a key or knock on a door, because this threshold was opened not by a physical door, but by a spiritual key. But something opened inside of me, as if a locked door hidden for thousands of years in the deepest parts of my soul was opening. For a moment, a flash of light passed before my eyes, but this wasn't an external light. It was a light emanating from within me. The whole universe, all time, seemed to pass through me for a moment, as if a veil was torn in the depths of my soul. At that moment, all prophecies, all secrets, all past and future passed before me like a film strip. The whispers in the village, Hecate's dreams, the old woman's words, all gained meaning. I had become part not only of my own destiny, but also of the destiny of this world. At that moment, I felt that I was not alone. On my back was the prayer of thousands of years of women. this was not just my journey, it was also the story of all women like me, cursed, outcast, but never giving up, finding their own paths, discovering their own strengths. Their souls merged with mine, giving me strength, giving me courage. At that moment, I saw myself not as a victim, but as a seer. At that moment, I understood that I had found Hecate's key, that fiery key. That key was my own will. That key was my own power. When I opened my eyes, the world was no longer the old world. The air had grown heavy, as if every molecule held meaning, held power. The darkness was more intense, but this was not a frightening darkness. It was a powerful darkness holding secrets within. The moon was gone. Even the stars seemed to hang in a different arrangement, as if the rules of time and space had changed along with this transformation within me. I was still myself. I was Artemis, my mother's daughter, the village healer, the forest's companion. But now I was someone else. Not a victim, but a seer. Not a curse, but a blessing. I was an I, aware of my power, aware of my destiny, aware of my path. I was now on the threshold of another I.
Before the rock where I knelt, after feeling something open within me, the whole world paused for a moment. That ancient threshold was less a physical door and more a passage into the depths of my soul. The absence of the moon, the different alignment of the stars, these were all signs that the dimension I was in had changed. When I opened my eyes, I found myself neither in a forest nor in the village. Everywhere was pitch black, but this wasn't a darkness devoid of light. This was an embracing darkness where everything began, the first breath of existence. It felt as if it had been waiting for me for thousands of years in the deepest layers of my being. This darkness was neither terrifying nor threatening. On the contrary, it was peaceful. Like the mother's womb, it enveloped me, making me feel safe. This was an infinite tranquility, spreading in every direction. Time did not exist here. Past, future, and present melted into a single moment. My footsteps didn't echo because I wasn't actually moving. My physical body remained kneeling before the rock, but my soul was soaring through this unknown. I was simply existing. My existence was as light as a thought, as concrete as a memory. In the emptiness around me, sounds and images from my past appeared, dancing around me like shadows. This was a reflection of my subconscious, my repressed memories, and my deepest fears. This was a place where everything was laid bare, where nothing could be hidden. And then I confronted myself. First came the fears of my childhood, that shiver I felt in my room on full moon nights, listening to my mother's words, that feeling of helplessness when I couldn't heal the baby burning with the high fever. All of them emerged from the darkness like ghosts and stood before me. That small girl, Artemis, hands trembling, eyes full of fear, looked at me helplessly. Beside her, my mother's whispers came. The wisdom she taught me was also a heavy legacy she carried on her shoulders. The fear I felt when I took over that legacy multiplied in the darkness like an echo. My mother's voice said, "Don't go out during the full moon." But this was not just a warning. It was also a reflection of fear. She had experienced the same fears before me. And finally, the cursed glances cast at me in the village, those eyes looking out of tiny windows, accusing me of being a witch, glowed like fireballs. On each face, there was that repulsive ignorance and hatred. The blood of the dead rooster flowed from my fingertips. The smell, the sound, everything about that moment came alive, as if I were living it again. But this time, I didn't run from them. I didn't close my eyes and let those dark memories swallow me. I walked towards them. I touched each fear, listened to each whisper,
understood the hatred behind each gaze. I didn't destroy them. I didn't go to war with them because I wasn't going to run anymore. They were a part of me. They were my past. I accepted them. I embraced my childhood fears, absorbed my mother's whispers as lessons, and transformed the cursed glances of the village into sources of strength. I integrated them with the pain, regret, and power within me. This was not a surrender, it was a victory. Everything from my past now made me stronger. Then she came. From the deepest point of darkness, a beam of light radiated. This was neither the light of the sun nor the moon. This was a pure white light, containing all the wisdom of the stars, all the energy of the earth, all the memories of time. Within the light, 3 figures appeared. Hecate. All 3 faces looked at me, the young maiden, the mother, and the wise old woman. But these 3 figures were not just faces. The young maiden represented my innocence, my purity, the early days of my healing. The mother represented my mother's wisdom, sacrifice, and the legacy she left me. The wise old woman represented my future, my destiny, and all my unfulfilled potential. As Hecate looked at me with all 3 of her figures, she didn't speak, she didn't touch me, but I understood everything. She was the ancient spirit who entered my dreams, burned the seal into my palm, and called me to this path. She was my guide, showing me that healing was a gift, but my true power was not to carry that gift, but to understand it. I was not her physical child, but my soul had awakened with her, reborn in her presence. In Hecate's eyes, I read the story of my only journey. With me, I also saw the stories of all the women who had walked these paths before me, who had found their own voices. At that moment, I understood that I was part not only of my own destiny, but also of a millennial-old legacy. My journey was their journey. Something broke inside me, like a piece of glass, like a link in a chain. Something shattered in the depths of my soul. That moment of breaking was like the sudden release of thousands of years of sorrow, pain, and accumulated anger. This was the chain of silence passed down through generations of women. It was the chain of women who had to hide their fears, their pains, their curses within them, who healed silently, suffered silently, died silently. That chain, with Hecate's light, with my newly awakened consciousness, vanished in an instant. And for the first time, I heard my own voice. It was a loud, clear, and powerful voice. It was neither my mother's voice, nor Hecate's, nor the earth's. This was only my voice. I am no longer afraid. My voice echoed in that embracing darkness. This was not just a sentence. This was a prophecy, a promise. It was the harbinger of a new beginning. Fears, curses, whispers, all evaporated with that voice. I was no longer a victim. I was a seer. When I opened my eyes, the forest was as it had been. Everything was the same. The cypress trees still stood tall, the wind still rustled the leaves, but I was not the same. I no longer saw the world with the same eyes. In every leaf, I saw a prophecy. In every stone, a secret. In every wind, a wisdom. Now I knew my path. This path led neither into bottomless darkness nor into flames. This was my own path, lost in the mist, but illuminated by Hecate's light. And I was ready to walk this path. This was the story of a woman who walked through darkness, a healer, a woman who faced her destiny and embraced it. This was the story of a voice that broke the silence, a voice in which every word, every curse, every fear suppressed for years suddenly vanished. This was the story not just of Hecate's daughter, but of Artemis, who walked in her path and found her own power. And now, this story is with you. Artemis's journey has ended, but her legacy continues. Maybe one day, you too will find your own door.